outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello and welcome to the Late Late Show with myself, Lee Pace. If you're listening live, great to have you on board. If you're listening later, still great to have you on board as well. Got a really great show planned tonight, a really great show. One show I've wanted to do since I agreed to be a host, because I think it produced so much debate, and hopefully I want to do the show because I want to learn from real experts and people who have a lived experience completely different to mine. So the title of the show, as you'll know, is What is the School to Prison Pipeline? Just want to give a mention to a couple of sponsors on the show. So Hachette Learning, the show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles. So before I introduce my guests, I like to give my take on the school to prison pipeline. And I deliberately chose this. It's an idea. I'm not saying I don't like it, because it's too big a thing to say. I don't like the fact that it includes the word school. I think that bothers me because I work in a school, I'm a leader in a school. And I think it's really, really simple to say they just go. And I'm learning more all the time because I've already had conversations with these two amazing guests. So I think it oversimplifies it. I think there's so many factors why people find themselves in a prison, which I find incredibly sad. But I think tonight's show is about exploring the idea of the school to prison pipeline, but also thinking about what we can do as an education system and schools, because I think the two things are kind of different, really, to make it better, to give youngsters a much better chance. But before I talk too much and hopefully do a little bit of challenging, I want to let my guests introduce themselves. So if you don't mind, Graham, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, of course you can. Thanks, Lee. I'm Graham Frost, and I was in Borstal when I was a very young man, a long time ago, because I got in trouble with the police and for burglary and theft. And then many years later, I found myself actually starting a community interest company called Heart Shaped Decisions about 3 or 4 years ago, which has led me into working in prisons with men who are doing, different lengths of sentences. I haven't worked with any women. And I also work with a charity which helps people when they come out of prison. And so I've probably worked with around about 200 men in prison over the last 3 or 4 years. And I have formed some opinions, about and spoken to quite a few people who've committed a lot of different sorts of crimes. I've talked to them about their background and how they got into crime sometimes, and got to know some of them quite well, and that has helped me to sort of form some opinions on the different reasons why people go into prison.
Thank you. And David, if you don't mind introducing yourself a little bit.
Thank you, Lee, and good evening, everyone. I'm David Breakspear. Like Graham, I've got lived experience of the criminal justice system, and I've also got lived experience of the subject that we're talking about, the school to prison pipeline. These days, since turning my life around, following my 9th and final prison sentence in 2017, I've been using my lived experience to not change the world, but using my lived experience to try and influence the way that people think. Because it's quite easy to see people in the criminal justice system as bad, when the majority of people in the criminal justice system are normally good people that have made bad decisions. And yeah, so that's me.
It's really interesting to say that. A few years back, I worked in a school in Wolverhampton, and one of our parents was a deputy governor at Featherstone Prison. And he invited me and my friend Pat to do a couple of sessions. We were doing some philosophy in school, and we went into the prison to do some philosophy sessions with them. And what you've just said is exactly how I described these people that I met. That these are good people that made some bad decisions.
Mm.
And
it's not just about making bad decisions or making bad choices. It's about the platform from which those decisions and choices are made from.
Yeah.
As I mentioned when we were talking before we started about how we view things from our own perspective, and about you shouldn't really judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes.
No. So let's get back to the big question then. So what is the school to prison pipeline?
Well, look, for me, the school to prison pipeline, I use it as a way of explaining, if you like, why the same groups of people keep ending up in the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. And just to kind of, if you like, throw some figures your way. SEN students, special educational needs students, make up 17% of the school population. However, they make up 50% of all permanent exclusions. And I mean, well, that just on its own speaks for itself. Do you know what I mean? Making up 17% of the school population and 50% of permanent exclusions. Now, I'm someone who was late diagnosed. I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until 2010. And as you heard, I hadn't turned my life around until 2017. Because for me at that time, it was just another label. I'd been so used over my life to be given labels that it was just another label that I was given amongst many labels. And it wasn't until, 2015 when I started to turn my life around. I was released from prison in 2017, that I started to really understand about myself and the reasons. No, it wasn't looking for excuses. It was looking for reasons. And the way I look at it is knowing that I was ADHD kind of gave me excuses, if you like, but understanding my ADHD is where I received or I got the reasons, and I was able then to kind of create for myself a map and find my own way out of the criminal justice system. But the reason why I'm saying that is because one thing that I'm really passionate about are children who are neurodivergent. And I think that we're unfortunately letting them down. And the figures speak for itself.
Yeah.
I would agree with everything David says there, because I'm not neurodivergent myself, although funnily enough, a few years ago I saw a presentation about autism, and I looked at it, I thought, I've got one or two of those traits, but very, 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 very light. But I certainly haven't got ADHD. But what I can say is that probably 75-80% of the guys that I've worked with in prison and coming out of prison, they have got some kind of neurodiversity going on. They've got ADHD. Some of them have got ADHD. They've got OCD. They are people who have a lot of the time struggled in mainstream education, because the system doesn't actually have enough space for to look after them properly.
Let's be honest, school is set up for people to go on to college and university. That's what it's set up for. And then obviously people then can go on to work. It's the universities that set the exams, isn't it?
It depends. I think you've got the qualifications commission and people like that are different. I mean, for GCSEs, there's different companies that set the exams, like edXL and people like that.
I just wonder if, I mean, I do not wish to place the blame on individual teacher, because I know quite a few teachers and they all work very hard and they all mean extremely well.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll just ask the question: Are there any teachers who are actually neurodiverse themselves who can understand neurodiverse kids? I don't know the answer to that.
No. Just to try and play a bit of devil's advocate, or from a place of naivety, really, I suppose. And you talked about neurodiversity. Also, I work with lots of neurodiverse children. How does the system let them down that leads them to perhaps a life of crime?
Because for me, once a child misbehaves at school, we spoke about inspections, or you mentioned about someone coming into school for a couple of days. Imagine how that makes you feel, or we don't have to imagine, how, or Ofsted coming into the school. It must put people on edge, adult teachers on edge. Imagine a child that's been in trouble and then all of a sudden they're put under surveillance. And it seems as if they're always under surveillance. And this isn't about children being defiant or children being disobedient, I suppose is another word. It's about them being, it's about what's going on the inside, not what we're seeing as adults.
Yeah.
It can mean that a child is overwhelmed. It can mean that a child is masking. Do you know what I mean? There's so many different things that it could be, but it seems as if straight away we're going to persistent and disruptive behaviour.
Yeah. And one of the things we've done at our school, we started a couple of years ago. We worked with a company called Trauma Informed UK, and it covered all sorts of things. Obviously, the trauma and the adverse childhood experiences. But we touched on neurodiversity and things like that. And I think where it's really helped me as a professional, I know it helped my colleagues, is, and I think, we mentioned your TED talk, didn't we, David? I'm sure it is that you mentioned what it does is when we're faced perhaps with that sort of defiant behaviour, or the behaviours we don't want, or behaviours that perhaps we would see as fall below expectation, we do take a step back. I think it just helps us to think, right, there's a circumstance behind this, rather than, because we as teachers, we're only human, aren't we, as teachers? So I think that's helped. That has helped.
The problem is as well that there's too much inconsistency. It's like there's a head teacher in a school. It was in the press, I think last year or the year before. A child was caught bringing a knife into school, and he brought the knife in to show his mates. There was nothing. There was no intention behind it, if you like, no violent intention behind it. Any other school, he would have probably been excluded, but they kept him in school, and they was able to educate him about why carrying knives is wrong. And the child went on to secure top grades in GCSEs. So it's like a sliding doors moment, isn't it? That headmaster could have quite easily excluded him, and yet he didn't, educated him in what he had done wrong, but hadn't punished him and given him the opportunity to kind of, get on with his life rather than have to survive for the rest of his life. Because the thing about exclusions is you're not just being excluded from school, you're being taken away from positive role models. You're being taken away from adult role models. And the chances are, for me, anyway, years ago, the only people that I was able to hang around with are other kids that were excluded from school, or adults that weren't working and were involved in a life of crime. So those people become my role models because I was so much spending time out of school. Excuse the dog, sorry. Let me mute that while I shut it up.
Now, I've got there's a comment, I think it's coming from LinkedIn, as Dr. Wayne Reed, and he's kind of put like a suspension. Oh yeah, I can see on the suspension, repeat suspension, permanent exclusion, PRU, which is pupil referral unit, alternative provision, low attainment, NEAT, youth justice contact. So you kind of like that slippery slope, and like you just said, that sliding doors moment. that would have been that first word.
Yeah, and to me, what that shows is that unmet needs are being punished. Neurodivergence is being managed through exclusion. Vulnerability is being reframed as risk. And like I said, the education ends just as the surveillance side of things begins.
Yeah. I mean, there's pressures from everywhere. So, I mean, again, just to try and pose a challenge, what about how would you tackle how would you respond to a parent that said, I don't want my child in a class with children like that?
That do you know what? That sounds so Old Testament, doesn't it? Let's sacrifice the few to save the many.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know,
your child should miss out because it's interrupted my child. Well, how about understanding the behaviour of the child is? And look, at the end of the day, before we go any further, I do not blame teachers because I think teachers do an incredible job. They're overworked, they're underpaid, they're under a hell of a lot of stress because they're having to meet these KPI targets and these league tables. So I do not blame teachers, and I don't expect teachers to become experts in neurodivergency. I don't expect them to become experts in ACEs. I don't expect them to become experts in anything other than what it is that they're teaching and be allowed to teach. It's the system.
Yeah,
that's where it goes. It's the system. It's a system that needs reforming. We don't off-rolling exists because school league tables exist. If we didn't have school league tables, I doubt if schools would be excluding half the children that they're excluding.
Yeah,
that's absolutely true. Yeah, I mean, I think I got into trouble when I was the first time I ever got into trouble with the police. I was actually 11 years old. I was very compliant as a child because I had to be, because I was brought up in a very strict religion, and so at the age of 11, I rebelled by going shoplifting in Woolworths, and in those days. And I actually got arrested and put on probation for shoplifting in Woolworths at the age of 11.
Yeah.
Woolworths was great for nicking as a kid, wasn't it?
I mean, but and I've actually asked many people the question. I do talks and that kind of thing. People say to me, and that wouldn't happen now. If you're arrested at the age of 11, you wouldn't get put on probation for shoplifting, and Woolworths doesn't exist anymore. But you wouldn't get put on probation. And then my family kind of ostracized me, and that was the beginning of the sort of rebellion that ended up with me leaving home at the age of 17, and then getting into bad company and getting done for burglary and theft, and that's what got me into Borstal. So you don't know what is going on in a young person's life until you get to know that young person.
Yeah.
And when I was at school, I was very compliant. I just used to sit there and do what I was told, because it was in the days, I went to school in the 60s and early 70s, and you had to be compliant at school, otherwise you got stuff thrown at you, or there was still corporal punishment. I never got the cane. I was sent to the headmaster's office once, and I was literally terrified. I thought, that's it, I'm going to get the cane. I didn't, but that was enough to make me compliant. But then, funnily enough, there was one, and I always say this, if ever I talk to teachers that I know, I always say that there was one person in my secondary school in London, because my family moved from Essex to London, which was quite a culture shock in those days. And I'm glad it happened, because it actually transformed my life. But there was one teacher who kind of took me out. Well, she wasn't a teacher, she was actually the school librarian, who took me under her wing. And I know, Lee, we've had conversations like offline about, there's a young person that comes and sits in your office and talks to you at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And you built kind of a rapport with that young person. And I think it's important, kind of outside of the teaching relationship, if you see a young person, you think that young person's struggling, to try and maybe build some kind of rapport with them, so they trust you enough to talk to you about whatever's going on in their life.
Yeah.
And I know you do that, and I'm sure many teachers and teaching assistants do it, and indeed librarians. It was a librarian who was almost like my saviour, and she said to me, come and work in the library, come and volunteer and I went and volunteered in the library. Actually, it was to get out of PE because I hated PE. But I look back on, and her name was Susan Martin, and I often she'd be in her 80s now if she's still alive. But I look back on her, and she was one of the positive influences in my life. And teachers do have that fantastic opportunity to be a positive influence on a young person who's having a troubled life.
See, my problem, Graham, is I'm the youngest of 6. So I've got 2 brothers and 3 sisters. And I had to follow them through infant school or primary school, whatever you call it these days, and junior school. And of course, as a child, one thing that we all struggle is an identity. So you can imagine that, and it wasn't just at school as well. It was in my own home, but I'd be called by my siblings' name before I get called by my name. In the community, in the local community, it's like, oh no, it's not Kevin, it's David. So, and then I'd be in school and it'd be like, you're not like your brother, you're not like your sister. Oh, you don't, you know what I mean? So it's like, as a kid, I'm always being compared to one of my siblings. And then when I hit the secondary school I went to, 2 of my cousins had gone there and they were quite badly behaved. And as soon as I was behaving badly in that school, you're just like your cousins. So I was being, that kind of behaviour was being validated. It's like, great, I've got an identity. And it's like I became challenging, disruptive. I became a troublemaker. The schools were happy to label me a challenging, disruptive and as a troublemaker. So that was my identity. And my purpose was to play up to those labels as much as I possibly could. I went to, I was under a child psychologist, I can't remember which, but he diagnosed me as having conduct disorder. And it was like, it was another label to play up to. Do you know what I mean? I was a class clown already. My kind of schoolmates, classmates, if you like, expected me to behave in a certain way. Some of the teachers wouldn't even let me in their classroom. Do you know what I mean? But my behavior was so bad in their classroom. So I was buggered before I started. Do you know what I mean? Following. And the thing is, it's that how often do teachers do that? How often do teachers expect a sibling that follows another sibling to be exactly the same as that sibling that's already gone through, whether it's positive or negative? It's like we have to look at each child as an individual. And that's the thing. If you come from a certain postcode, teachers going to have, in particular schools, teachers going to have unconscious bias towards that postcode. There's probably teachers that are going to have unconscious bias towards colour, race, religion, gender, even these days. So there's a lot of unconscious bias, I think, that needs to be addressed as well in our schools. We all carry unconscious bias. We've got to admit that we carry bias. Again, I said to you before we started that I don't know. It's only because I was involved in the criminal justice system and for so long that I care and that I want to use my lived experience to try and influence change and to influence the way that people think. But if I hadn't been involved with the criminal justice system, would I be someone that would be directed by, would I have a set of blinkers on and be directed by the media headlines? And that would be how I saw the criminal justice system, from the perspective of a Daily Mail headline, if you like. And no one wants that perspective. However, I can't say that I wouldn't have had that perspective because I don't know do you know what I mean? I don't know what my perspective would have been. It's only because I spent so long in the criminal justice system that I have that perspective. And again, I don't do it because I'm wrong. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm doing it for a reason. I'm sharing my lived experience because of all the people, and Graham mentioned it earlier, all the people that I've met in prison, in the roles that I've covered in prison. Since I've been out, I've gone back into prison over the years as well, talking to the lads. It's the same old story, time after time after time after time. And there's I don't think we mentioned it, but I'm also not bad for someone kicked out of permanently excluded at 14, but I'm now studying for a master's in applied forensic psychology. And I don't believe that's the potential that's only just come to me late on in life. I think that was a potential I've had all my life, because I've always enjoyed education. It was the school system that I had an issue with.
Yeah. We've got a question.
I want teachers to understand. It's like when we're at school, or sorry, not teachers to understand, but governors, management, the system to understand that when you exclude a child from school, you're throwing them with the wolves.
Yeah.
A question from Tom, who you met earlier. I'll put it on there. It says, when does responsibility for one's personal actions and choices start?
But again, with respect to choices, it comes from what platform you're making those choices from.
Mm.
Now, if we're taking, let's take shoplifting for argument's sake. Graham mentioned it there. Let's take a single mother struggling on benefits, has got 2 kids, the dad's left or he's in prison. So if he's in prison, she has to help him out with money as well. And she goes to the shop and she nicks some food for the child to eat. All right. That's the choice that she has to make there. Now, obviously, if she got caught, she'd be arrested. But her consequence isn't being arrested. Her consequence is her child not eating. So there's a shift in consequence. What the normal public would see as a theft, she sees as survival. So that's a choice. Do you know what I mean? She made a choice to go and steal the food, but she's doing it so she can feed her children.
Yeah, is it?
I think for me to answer that question, I think it starts at different times for different people, and for some people, they never get there. For instance, I mean, I was talking to a guy in prison. I'll never forget this particular guy. I'll never forget a lot of them, but he's actually an IPP prisoner, which means he's serving an indeterminate sentence. And I've met him a couple of times, and I'm hoping to meet him again actually later this year. And he started off. His father didn't figure in his life at all. His mother was a drug addict, and the first time he got nicked, he was 8 years old. He got nicked for stealing money from the church, because the church was just down the road, and he knew there would be money in there because he'd been to church and he saw people putting money in the collection box, and so he knew there'd be money there. He went to the church to steal the money, to go to the shop and buy food for him and his sister, because his mother had no money because she'd spent it all on drugs. And that was when he was 8 years old, and that's the life he knew. And he told me, he said, he'd spent all his life in and out of prison from the age of about 12 or 13 in secure units and one thing and another, because he literally hadn't had any positive role models in his life at all. He didn't know how to, but he did take responsibility for feeding himself and his sister. You could argue, but
I take responsibility for all my actions. You know what I mean? It's like, however, when I was at school, and we're talking about the 1980s, I had undiagnosed ADHD. I didn't know that. Do you know what I mean? I didn't understand why I was doing the thing. I didn't do things because I wanted to do them. Do you know what I mean? I'd done them kind of automatically, impulsively.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Without thinking, taking risks without thinking of the consequences. Do you know what I mean? So I understand the question about responsibility and choice, but we don't allow young people to vote until they're 18. So if we want to go down that line, then we can say when someone's 18, that's when choice and responsibility becomes a legality, if you like.
Yeah. I remember talking to one of the inmates. I don't know how you'd refer to it, a prisoner inmate. And they were talking to about a story of when they got a puncture. And they went to change the wheel on their car, but they didn't. They couldn't find the spanner. There was like a big spanner in there with it, and then so he walked to Halfords and just stole one. It never occurred to him that he might need to pay. It's just because that's not how he lived. So it wasn't even that he thought about the consequence. It just wasn't what he did. He never entered his head to pay for it. And I found that amazing, and that's why this is so interesting for me, who has no lived experience of your experience. If we
For
talk about
me-
pipeline, I'm at the other end.
The time when consequence hit home was when the cell door shut in prison on your first night.
Yeah,
That's when or when you're sitting in reception of a prison and you've got 4 years up your jacksie.
yeah,
That's when it's like, that's when prison's a deterrent, not when you're in society.
yeah.
Because if prison was a deterrent, if prison did what it was supposed to do, we wouldn't have as many people in prison as we got now.
No, and
Yeah, I
another
think-
thing, when I was talking to the deputy governor, I know, but he said people do complain about prison's not harsh enough, or prison's not this and prison's not that.
Yeah,
What
people
they
have
do
never
forget
been in
is-
prison.
Yeah, but what they do forget is actually these people have to go back out and live in the community, and we have to prepare them for that. You know, in a perfect world, there'd be taxpayers and you know, good members of society, I suppose. In perhaps a lot better words.
People are only one mistake away from going to prison.
Yeah, yeah,
Or I just have another one. I'm not over the limit. Get involved in a crash. You're over
Yeah.
the limit. Drink driving. Someone's been
Yeah.
killed. Whatever. Boom. Your whole life is going to turn around.
yeah. And what-
It's like, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Some people need to look at it as.
And in school, that's really interesting. And all the different types of groups that you talk about, like you know, some of the prisons with
Free school
SEN,
meals.
yeah,
Free school meals are more
yeah,
like
free school meals, looked after children.
disproportionately. Black children are more likely
Yeah.
to be
So
excluded.
in schools, we
Disproportionately, children from the travelling gypsy community, Romani community, they're more likely to be excluded.
yeah,
Not
that's interesting.
Johnny, who lives on a lovely estate around the corner, like got his mum and dad. His dad's probably the governor. He ain't going to end up in prison. Do you know what I mean?
No,
He might
so
get done
we-
later on in life because he's a cokehead, but
We know these groups, and actually at
He's
schools.
probably angry at his parents.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's-
I'm going off on one.
You're okay. You're okay.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is like all the groups that we find in prison, those are special educational needs, who've been on free school meals, being looked after in care, being excluded. Schools are aware of all these, and actually, I suppose we do attach some risk to them, but not in terms of going to prison. The risk we attach to them is they may not succeed in academically. So
that's what the school really is bothered about, isn't it? But
So-
surely that duty of care
And
should
that's-
extend beyond that, and that kind of right. Okay, if we exclude this child, and you've got to consider their path as well, their kind of backgrounds as well. It's like if they come from a family that have got a criminal past or are involved in criminality, if they come from a family who have a negative view of the education system, what chance have they got?
yeah.
There's a responsibility on society and the education system to give that child the best opportunity to make the best choices in life. There's responsibility and choice.
Yeah. So good, and this I think this ties in perfectly. Tom again. Thanks, Tom. So how do we prepare them for that choice or that responsibility at 18? I think it's getting back to a comment you made a little
Well,
while
we build
ago.
responsibility slowly, didn't we? Because at the end of the day, and the thing is, like Graham said, it's subjective to the individual. We talk about girls and boys. Boys in the criminal justice system, it's said, don't mature until they're 29 years old because of the environment and everything else that goes on in their life. So although I mentioned about 18, it's like, I'm only saying that because that's the age that we're legally allowed to vote and buy alcohol and gamble. So like when you think of responsibility and choice, there's a lot of responsibility and choice involved in those things that I've just mentioned. So, but yeah, so it's like, it comes down to the individual, doesn't it? It's like when it's responsibility and choice gets drip feeded.
Yeah.
Gets drip fed. When do they introduce options? Because it's like when you start school, you have to do what it's expected of you, aren't you?
Yeah.
Then you get to a certain year and you're allowed to choose certain
Yeah.
subjects.
Year 9. Yeah. Year 9. So when they're
So
13,
it's
13 to 14.
kind of choice and
think,
responsibility comes with age, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As you get older, you're getting more and more responsibility. It's like you can drive your scooter at the age of 18, but you can't a 750. You have to be a certain age to drive a 750. You can't go out and drive a HGV straight off. You got to have a license for this. Do you know what I mean? It's like responsibility and choice is a kind of sliding scale the older you get. the older you get, the more responsibility you should have, and hopefully that leads you have more choice. But again, choice is something that's subjective. It's about what kind of choice and opportunity that child potentially has.
Yeah.
And again, if he's coming from that kind of disadvantage, socioeconomic, whatever background, then his choices are going to be a lot less limited than someone else's choices.
Yeah. One of the ideas the government are putting forward, or they have put forward, is that if there is a suspension, and I think don't quote me, I'm just trying to remember.
Turn away, please.
Yeah, so they do it internally. Now, resources aside, let's imagine the school has the resources and they're going to put some money into it. And they serve that suspension, say it's a 3-day suspension, they serve it within school. What do you think would really help them during that 3 days to make it incredibly productive? Because that would turn it on its head a little bit, wouldn't it? The sanction is, I suppose, that suspension, but it's not necessarily then as they won't be as isolated. But what should happen with them?
We want
I'm not
sorry, but I was going to say we want children to fall in love with learning. If you fall in love with learning, you're going to learn. And the way to do that is something that I was involved in a few years ago through the University of Gloucester, was something called RENYO, which is reintroducing education into young offenders. And basically there was something in there called authentic inquiry. And it's sitting the child down, speaking to the child and finding out what their interests and their likes and everything else are. And they've done this with children in a secure unit. And I was fortunate enough to be involved in a meeting where one of the managers brought some of the work into the meeting from some of these children in Vinnie Green secure unit. And the work that they produced, and we're talking about children that hated school, absolutely hated school, and they're designing these brochures that are, I mean, like they've been designed by university students, let alone children that are in a secure unit up in Bristol. It's just, it's about getting children, loving, love learning.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling with a cold, by the way, so I apologise.
No, it's okay. Certainly not. I'm just playing the devil's advocate. And 24 years in education, and knowing the voice of some parents, probably a minority, they would say that's like they're having a reward for poor behaviour. How would you respond to that, Graham? I'd like to hear what, because I know we have a few debates about this, Graham, and behaviour, don't we, in school? So
going back to my own lived experience, and I, as a child and even as a young adult, going back to this whole question of responsibility, I think a lot of it comes down to confidence and self-esteem, because I know that I didn't have any confidence or self-esteem at all when I was growing up. I was just literally, because I wasn't encouraged to have it at home, and really I don't think I was encouraged that much at school. I think we need to try and build young people up, and if they do, some young people are going to struggle. I've only ever any good really at one subject at school, and it was English. I excelled at English. I loved reading. I loved writing. I still do love reading and writing. Anything, in years that I've sort of come afterwards, I've got more into history and a little bit of geography and that kind of thing. But it wasn't made interesting. How can we make education more interesting and engaging? How can we make young people, like you say, love learning? Maybe not everybody is going to love every subject. I was never going to love maths. My partner, on the other hand, loved maths and hated English, and she's ended up doing a job that involves her love of maths, and she can sort out a mathematical problem. Whereas I've always done things that have involved English, either speaking or writing or whatever. But for me, it's about it's really about trying to education should be about trying to get every young person to be the best they can be at at whatever their talent is, whatever their skill is. Because you cannot turn every young person out to be the same.
No. Are you suggesting
And that's what schools are, aren't they? And not only are they one size fits all, but they're also designed for neurotypical.
Yes.
School isn't designed with neurodivergency in mind. The same as the criminal justice system, courts, police stations, prisons. None of it are designed with neurodivergency in mind whatsoever. It's all designed by neurotypical for neurotypical. So if you've got a child going to school with undiagnosed neurodivergence and no one knows about that neurodivergence, they're going to struggle in school. So for me, one of the best things that schools can do is screen at an early age and continue screening. I'm no expert, but I'm sure there are periods through a child's life where screening could take place to try and unearth that any neurodivergence that may be sitting there. And not only will that give that child the best opportunity in life, it'll give the school the best understanding of that child to give him the best education in life as well. But again, it's not teachers. It's like teachers need help. They need support.
Yeah, of course.
Teachers are there to teach. It's that simple. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't run into a hospital to get a surgeon to go and change a tyre. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think you
wouldn't ask the mechanics to go and do a heart surgery on your missus.
Yeah.
You'd get a surgeon to do it. Do you know what I mean? So teachers are there to teach. However, there needs to be a lot more support around those teachers for the children that not only is great for the children, but is also great for the teachers as well. Yeah. And that hopefully would lead on to more teachers being retained.
I can imagine a lot of teachers smiling when you said we're here to teach.
Well, you are.
Having that support around us.
You go to school, you go to college, you go to university, the main path into teaching, to teach. Do you know what I mean? You don't do 10 years of studying to become a doctor to then become a fisherman. Do you know what I mean? No. You do it so you can teach. Yeah. You don't do it so you can diagnose children. You don't do it so you can be a mental health expert to a child. You do it to teach. But that doesn't mean to say that those resources should not be available in schools for children.
Yeah, that would be good. I'm just going to do
it costs £300 million now to build a prison. Imagine investing that now into schools. The impact that would have in 5 years' time, 7 years' time would be massive. That's one prison's worth of money. That would probably shut 3 prisons. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. We need to invest in our children so we can protect our future. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a prison population of about 150,000 in another 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it costs £55,000 a year to keep somebody in prison. You could actually, I mean, it's actually more expensive than sending a child to fee pay in school. You know,
you could sort out the homeless situation by paying people's rent. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's give someone some like get involved in criminal justice system, give them 30 grand. Be a lot cheaper. Do you know what I mean? With 30 grand, they might be able to build something.
Just a quick segue. I just need to do a quick mention again.
No worries.
I'll come back to you in a second. So, just want to remind viewers, listeners, about Teachers Talk Connect, and that's back, our annual CPD and network extravaganza. Join the TTR team on Saturday, the 14th of March in Manchester. Tickets are free. What are you waiting for? Head over to ttradio.org/connect26. So back, and I did actually read, Graham, the cost. I did actually read the cost of keeping someone in prison is £55,000 a year.
That's the average.
That's incredible.
That's the average. I mean,
that's the average. You look at somewhere like Wetherby, where it's like 12 to 17-year-olds. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure it's 12 to 17-year-olds. It's like 155,000 a year.
Yeah, there is a
It's a
place
sliding
in
scale. Your
Yeah.
normal, your kind of lowest price is a Category C prisoner.
Yeah.
They're the lowest. And then you've got women in prison. I think they're around about £70,000 a year. So it's a sliding scale between all the different categories. Category A, high security prisons, they're a hell of a lot more expensive to run than £55,000 a year. That's for sure.
Yeah. There's so much we could be doing better, I think, as a system.
Of course,
Cost a lot. And I think there'll always be the finance thing, but like you say, lots of money goes into prisons because it has to, because there's people there, and it's increasing, isn't it? And I think it's good. They think it's going to be 100,000 in the prisons by 2030, and they're all getting older. We joked about our ages; we're all 50 plus. If we were in prison, we'd be more expensive than perhaps a 32-year-old. I don't know, because of, health and things like that. So I think it's just redistribution of money. And the other thing I read, I'm a math teacher, so I like statistics. I think it was something like 90% of the prison population have been permanently excluded. I think that may have been young offenders. So, but it's the incredible risk factors are.
That is young offenders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the last time. Go on, Graham.
Look, I mean, everybody that I can remember, I've worked in Category B and C prisons, and I've worked with people coming out of prison, and I've said this before, but they all have had some kind of serious adverse childhood experiences.
You don't end up in prison because things are going well.
No, you absolutely don't end up in prison because things are going well. I mean, even when I was in Borstal, the lads I was in Borstal with, most of them had some kind of adverse. I mean, adverse childhood experiences weren't even talked about in the 1970s. I mean, the first research on ACEs didn't come out until the 1980s. And I've done training on adverse childhood experiences. I know a little bit about it, and there are about 7 or 8 different adverse childhood experiences that are categorized as that.
Yeah.
And people that are in prison have normally experienced 3 or 4 of them. I personally had 3 different, and I had a reasonably. Everybody would have said, "Oh, he's had a reasonable upbringing." But if I went back into my family history, there was a lot of mental health problems that weren't even recognised in the day, because my mother grew up with them. My mother grew up in a very unusual situation, and it affected her mental health for the rest of her life. And then I left home when I was 17. That made her worse, and that affected the rest of my siblings. You're the youngest of 6, David. I'm actually the eldest of 6. So so I was supposed to be the role model for the other 5, and I was actually the black sheep of the family, and I was the one that got everything wrong. So because I didn't stick to what was expected of me. But in later years, hopefully I've been able to put that right by being a positive role model for people. I can go into prisons, and I can say, despite the fact that I went off the rails at an early age, I came out of prison and did something useful with my life.
I think that's what inspires me about both of you. Was I don't know whether coming out the other side's the right way to see it. It's only the way I see it. Like you keep saying, David, you can only see it through your own eyes, can't you? But it could have been so much worse for you two, I think, is what I'm saying. But you've turned it around and thought, I can make a difference.
I think I had when I was at school, I can think of a couple of good teachers that I had. I had very good primary school teachers, and I didn't realise that at the time. I had 2 very good teachers in primary school, and 1 or 2, including the librarian that I spoke about before, in secondary school. But then when I was in Borstal, there was a couple of officers in there that actually took an interest in me, and they kind, one of them actually sat me down one day and said, what are you doing with your life? You're not a criminal. And that was probably, in all honesty, going back to the question about responsibility. So I was like 19 or 20, and I suddenly thought to myself, it's actually up to me to change my life. And luckily, it happened to me at that age, and not maybe 20 or 30 years later, because I could have carried on following.
When that happened to me.
I could have carried on, following the bad people. I mean, I got into trouble because somebody else suggested to me that it would be a good idea to start burgling hotel rooms and nicking travellers' checks. When I was 18, I was a very impressionable and naive 18-year-old, 18-year-old, and I needed to stop following the wrong people. Fortunately, I learned that lesson, and hopefully I've been able to give something back now by helping other people to maybe take a little bit of responsibility for themselves. But it has to be. I mean, I've spoken to guys very recently who are in their 40s, and they come out and they say, I'm absolutely fed up with going in and out of prison. I've got to do something with my life. I've got to change. But they have to make that decision themselves. Nobody else can make it for them.
Yeah, I think one of the things we do well at our school, so I'm really, really proud of, is we get to know the students as best we can. And not because we have to, it's because we want to. We're really lucky to work those sorts of staff, and I think it's just as well as we teachers getting to know the students. And I'm getting into teacher mode now and lecturing. Letting the students know you a little bit. Yeah. Perhaps don't take yourself too seriously. So So for example, in our year 8s, the girls might have their hair combs out, and they shouldn't have their hair combs out in the classroom. Really, not really. They shouldn't. And I'll say, I'll take that off you, and I'll use it for my own hair, and just little things like that. They really respond to that. You can poke a bit of fun at yourself. You are human. I live in a community where I teach.
And I bet there's a better outcome than just snatching it off of them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think
there you go.
It goes all the way back to that. Not necessarily being trauma informed, but just seeing the situation perhaps in a different way. Just very slightly different. And it's a few years ago, and a boy was teasing me for being bald. And I say it because I really, really don't mind. But I'm also aware that some men don't, really, really bothers them. So I spoke to this boy. I said, I think it's really funny when you're teasing me and stuff like that. But I don't want you to get in trouble, somewhere else where you tease someone that get hurt, because. But that's it comes back to that personal responsibility. I think the boy would have been 13 then, so he perhaps wouldn't know where that balance is, and it's up to us to just help them and guide them towards that as well.
What you do as a child, you push boundaries. If you don't push boundaries, you won't learn.
Yeah.
You end up becoming a politician.
Yeah. What was it called? I've been called a kiwi fruit. I think that was my best name. So. But I think it's having yeah, you get it. So I suppose have the boundaries. I think we touched on consistency. You talked about that teacher, being consistent. We try and be consistent with our approaches, but adaptable as well. I know some schools go very, very, and we're stepping into behaviour policies now, aren't we? But they go very, very zero tolerance. And I think you need consistency, you need the rules, because it's like little mini society schools, but also that adaptability. And also
like you say there, Lee, that schools are mini societies. And when you're excluded from school, you're being excluded, it feels, from society.
Yeah.
It's as if you're the problem, you're the issue, when it's probably not. It's what's going on inside that the issue is. And it's just how that behaviour, we all know that behaviour is communication, and it's about asking the right questions so we can get to that communication. Do you know what I mean? What is this behaviour for? Why is he exhibiting or she exhibiting this behaviour? Yeah. And getting through that. And that for me is the important part of early intervention, because once someone gets excluded from school, I'm not saying it's going to happen to everyone, but you're in survival mode. And as a kid, you're not understanding why you're in this mode, if you like, especially if you're neurodivergent, undiagnosed neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And you don't understand what's going on in yourself. And you're going through all these changes anyway. You're going through your teenage years, got all these changes going on, undiagnosed neurodivergency, being suspended, class clown. Class clown is usually because someone's a people pleaser, not because they're naughty. And do you know what I mean? That's where they're getting their passion or their kind of zest for life from, by being the class clown. They don't usually start off as a class clown. They do one or two things and they get labelled as a class clown. And as I say, once you start getting these labels, they're the labels you start playing up to.
Yeah.
There's a couple. There's two footballers. Ian Wright. I'm sure everyone knows what I'm talking about the Ian Wright one. Where he met up with one of his teachers, the teacher. But there's also, I saw, remember the old Man United goalkeeper, Peter Schmeichel, Danish Peter Schmeichel.
Yeah.
When he was at school, his teacher, you're going to play for Denmark one day. You're going to play for Denmark one day. You're going to play for Denmark one day. And he played for Denmark one day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's really important. Whereas for me, you're not like your brother. You're not like your sister. Yeah. Do you know what? I used to play football for a local youth club, Concord Youth Club. And obviously you get reports in the newspaper. I changed my name. I changed my first name, but not my surname. But I don't, looking back, as I say, it's like, for me, it's all about identity and purpose. And I was struggling for my own identity because I was so peed off with being, and as I say, I'd go down the town, local town, someone would say something about my brothers or my sisters. The youth club I went to, someone would say something about my brothers. And, do you know what I mean? I followed those, my local park. It's when my brothers and sisters hung out. But just like, And then everything would also be getting back to my mum. Worked in the local news agents, so everything would be getting back to my mum. My mum I'd get home and she'd tell me what I was up to. Oh, you were seen in Woolworths nicking stuff. You mentioned Woolworths. Yeah. You was in Woolworths nicking stuff. W.H. Smith nicking stuff. Such and such. See you throwing something at such and shouting at the police. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so even more I was feeling under surveillance. So again, I had all of this kind of chaos going on in my brain with the undiagnosed ADHD and everything else, struggling for an identity, struggling for a purpose. And all of a sudden, like, I'm given these labels and it's like, well, yeah, I know who it would be now. I play up to these labels and I go out with these other friends, so-called friends, start getting involved in crime, start getting pats on the back. You're brilliant at this. You're fantastic. You're great. All positive validation, but it was all positive validation in the criminal justice system and not in the education system.
Yeah, too late.
Yeah.
Before we sum up, I'll just do a quick shout out, and then we'll come back and we'll sum up. That's been an hour, but I'll be back. Just give me 30 seconds. So this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles. Okay, so going back to the original question, what is a school to prison pipeline? I still don't like the phrase, because I think school, because I just worry about schools, but I could absolutely, I just learned so much. And I think that idea of under surveillance, that's hit a bit home with me, I think. So how do we,
like I say,
imagine
how you feel when you've got Ofsted in your school. Now imagine a child that has to go to every class with his report card.
Yeah.
It's either going to work or it's going to send them completely the other way.
Yeah.
But it only worked temporarily. I mean, my report, when I used to get put on report, we used to get given it on a 1/4-inch bit of plyboard, A4 size, and it'd be sellotaped to that. And you'd have like, my report, excellent. Very good, excellent. Next week, when I'm off report, get out of my classroom.
Yeah.
it's that masking and playing up. Do you know what I mean? It's like, right, I better behave myself because I got this. But it was just. But then even that got too much. I'd been there. I'd be walking home from school and I'd throw it over the railway lines or whatever.
But
I think I think it's about really, and it's very difficult to do when you've got a class of 25, 30 young people.
That's why they need support. That's why it's not the teacher's fault.
Yeah.
We can't expect the teachers to do everything. Do you know what I mean?
No,
not for the teachers to do everything, but they need support. They need. I guarantee you that 99.99% of teachers would want every single child to be successful in life.
Of course they would.
Of course they do, and they don't go out of their way to ruin a child's life through exclusion. And that's not.
You don't go into teaching to not care about young people. It's a caring profession, isn't it?
If you wanted money, you become a footballer. Do you know what I mean? Or a darts player. You wouldn't go into teaching, would you? Because it's like it's a thankless task. You get blamed for everyone, but then I honestly feel sorry for teachers. I don't feel sorry for the education system. I think the education system is failing not just our children but also teachers.
Yeah. Okay. And I think with that, we'll finish. But Graham, thank you very much. It's just been fascinating learning even more about you. I know I've known you for a few years now, but you just do incredible work, especially with the Release Mates. So look out for Graham and his work with the Release Mates.
I second that. Great work.
Yeah, it's amazing work.
Thank you.
Whilst in a perfect world, we never want to pick up the PCs, but you're making a difference. You're giving people a chance. And David, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Just thank you for agreeing to be on the show first.
Thank you for providing the platform, mate. I'm just as grateful because without platforms like this, not only would I be talking in echo chambers, I'd be talking to a brick wall. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's nice to be able to have these sort of platforms so that I can speak to people that I wouldn't usually speak to.
Yeah. And I've learned so much as well. I really have. Thank you very much. And I hope you've enjoyed the show, everyone. I know I have. Final thank you to Graham and David.
Thanks all.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.